All right, today is December 7, 2022. This is the meeting of the Container Storage Interface Community. As a reminder, this meeting is public, recorded, and posted on YouTube. If you have anything you want to add to the agenda, feel free to do so, and we'll go through it top to bottom. You can find the link in your calendar invite. And today, so far, we have two items. One is the volume group PR from Xing, and the other is related to, I think this is the mount stuff from Deep, the runtime assisted mount. So we'll start with volume group PR. Xing, you want to take over here?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I think I mainly want to discuss with James about his concerns, but he couldn't join the call. But he did send us this message saying that he has this concern of expanding the existing voting service. So he was suggesting to add the voting group related logic to a separate new service. So I can definitely take a closer look of that. I think if we do that, there are still some new capabilities we need to add to the existing volume service. Like when you create a volume, the create volume request, we will need to add a volume group ID, and then when you respond it, in the volume message itself, there is also this volume group ID, and for snapshot as well, there is also a group snapshot ID in the snapshot message, right? So there are things that we still need to add, even if we separate this.
Couldn't we address that by having a new service have its own copy of create volume and create snapshot with the new arguments, and then any application that implemented both services would just have those two front-end RPCs sort of shunted to the same back-end implementation?
Well, then you're basically saying then they have to repeat, they have to completely redo their create volume.
Well, no, you would have two copies of the function, and you'd have to have two RPC receivers, but then they could just internally thunk down to the same function inside the CSI driver, right? So it would, it would look like two separate functions at the RPC layer.
Yeah, that would be too much overhead, right? Then basically then I think that will cause a lot of problems if you do that. If you basically like what are you supposed to do if you implement one, then you're not supposed to implement the other one?
No, you would like the old one would exist for users that were not using volume groups, and for any case where the volume groups were not being used, and then any driver that didn't support volume groups would be blissfully unaware of this entire feature.
But it's not but you are having basically you are saying copying this create volume service completely, copy the create volume and create snapshot, all of those functions into this different service, then we are expanding this other service. It's like exactly copy.
It sounds like there was just two though, right?
Then that's crazy. You just have like
you don't need to copy the delete and the attach and all the other things.
Have a different.
I'm just it's another way of addressing the problem without
I think that,
having any capabilities at all.
My concern is then you're kind of adding way too much stuff if you do that way, right? Basically, we're copying everything that is already in the existing controller service. We need to make another. Basically, we call it
that's not the proposal.
Service, and then we add a few things in and then saying, okay, driver, if you want to implement this one, then just abandon your old.
No. The idea would be that the new service would explicitly build on the existing service and say, like, for all of your regular CSI stuff, use the regular CSI RPCs. Here's two new special RPCs for creating volumes from groups and snapshots from groups, but everything else you continue to use the old one for.
Well, then I think that will be not optimal if you have to have two, and create volume itself has to become two separate method. Then that's not. I don't think that's good.
I mean, it's either that or new capabilities and new capabilities checks. Those are the two options that I see.
I think new capability check will be better, because otherwise we'll be literally just say that you have to kind of separate your like basically then they will have to implement two things. For the regular volumes, they use this. Then for your
Right, but they would be very thin. They'd be very thin front end functions to the real create volume function inside the CSI driver. Right, like yes, there would be two, but they would just be like one line of code that calls the other function.
too much overhead for CSI driver. Basically, just discourage them from going this route at all. Basically, that's just what it says. I think that's way too much.
I mean, that may be James's motive to sort of keep it away and discourage its use. I don't know what the motive is, but it is a
Well,
lot
he
of
did
new
not say.
code.
I did say that. I will take a closer look. I say that, but there are things we'll probably still need to introduce some new capabilities. He didn't say, "Oh, you completely cannot do that." At least he didn't say
Yeah.
that. So let me give more thought, and I will update the PR with this. I was just see if just want to see if it's even possible, right? I was thinking that it's
I mean,
it's possible.
one of the advantages to his proposal that I can see is it allows you to completely develop the whole thing and prove that it works without even touching the CSI API in principle.
Well, but then
and that way, if you need to iterate or go through multiple alphas.
Another different CSI interface, if the way that you're suggesting.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, we don't want to create like extra busy work, but I'm saying just in terms of what is.
I think that's too much for the CSI driver to do, to have to create a two completely two new, well,
would it just be another
two new create volume, right? Basically, like you say, because they also need to support the regular case. Well, group is not involved. It's not like they will 100% always add the volume to a volume group.
Right, but I mean,
so you're saying okay.
I'm saying another service.
If the create volume has
services
the
now,
group
right? We have the controller service, the node service, and the identity service. And like a single CSI driver supports all three of those usually. And so this would be a fourth one that you would support on top of the other three. And so, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of extra code, but it sort of keeps it nicely.
Yeah, I don't think that's really saves much. Actually, just adds too much overhead and make it very difficult for CSI driver to implement.
I mean, I think in terms of like getting testing and validation, that's why we added the alpha designations, right?
Right. Yeah. So those we will add. We definitely will add those. Right. So well, alpha.
Yeah, I don't think the concern is the fact that it's alpha and we might want to back it out or change it. I think the concern is the sheer size. Like this is not like one new function with an alpha argument or something. This is a lot of new functions.
But it's okay if we remove it. It's alpha, right? So alpha meaning it's not production ready, right? So removing that.
Yeah, I mean, technically, yes, we could add it as
also,
alpha.
Yeah.
So it sounded like James was willing to hop on a Zoom call some other time or wait for the meeting.
He said he was saying maybe probably need to arrange because otherwise we'll wait for another month. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But so let me see. Also, I know it's was getting close to the holidays. But he just came back from his vacation, so I will check and see if maybe.
Yeah, and I guess the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the other, I guess maybe concern just was around sort of all the different like permutations and ways you can add or modify the volume group. Like I don't know if we can simplify that and just like support one way to start with.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, that's all my question. Like maybe.
Yeah, I think that is tough. That is tough. The like some systems cannot just like add an existing volume. to a group others, for others, that's very
I
important.
guess, do
So
we
that
know how many systems can support that? Because I know that was maybe the case like a couple years ago, but is that still the case today?
I believe so. It's a fundamental difference between blog and the file, right? So I don't think that will change. But that can definitely confirm. Yeah, I can definitely confirm with them. I believe I think I asked Humble that for like SafeFS probably has that issue, but let me double check.
Okay, anything else on this specific topic?
So I will try to basically update this PR to address the comments from James, basically just to have just to draft it away that we could have a different separate service and see how that goes. And Michelle, other big concerns that so for this one, probably the one that you just mentioned, probably I will just double check with Humble would be one. SafeFS. What are other systems that I can check? I'm not sure. Or maybe I can check with so basically whoever has the shared file systems, basically.
Yeah, maybe also we can just send an email out to the do we have a CSI driver group mailing
I don't
list?
think the driver
Yeah.
group, we just have this CSI community, this list, right? Do we have a
Well, we have a community list and then there's the announce list. So I don't know if you want to use the announce list or the community list.
I think community list is probably good for discussions, but we could probably send an email to the community list and get feedback from all the folks that have drivers.
is this the same one that you're sending out this meeting, the meeting invite is to the community list, right? Sad.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So I think Michelle, the reason is for those, a group for them is it's like a file system. So you have to have the file system first before you can like create another file or something. It's something like that. So it's not possible to change that. You know what I'm saying? The grouping concept is different there compared to the block. So
I guess Ben, I'm calling you out, but do you know from like the NetApp stuff, like do you know how if the NetApp file system products can support that?
So yeah, NetApp has a lot of different products and it's changed over the course of my time there. So I don't know what still exists now, but over the years, like they've had every flavor you can imagine of ways of doing these groups for replication, groups for snapshots. Like I know there's at least one, the main product ONTAP can do arbitrary snaps or CG snapshots on an arbitrary set of volumes. Like it's completely arbitrary at any time. You can take it, groups can overlap, groups can change, anything is possible for snapshot groups. For things like replication, you kind of need to know at the time you set up the replication, everything that's going to be a member of the group, because it sets up, it basically does all the replication over a single pipe. There's flavors like that. And then there's like
But I guess for
economy
replication, can you like add and remove volumes from it?
not without like restarting the replication, like breaking the old relationship, setting up a new relationship with a new set of volumes. So it's effectively like deleting, let's say you have a group of 3 and you want to add a 4th member to it. Under the covers, you would basically delete the old group and create a new group with 4 members. And all the history would be lost, you know, and those kinds of things. So
Just
like
immutable.
you can play games like that, but
Can you add? Can you add? So basically, you cannot really. What about even adding a new volume? That should. You can
I mean,
add.
like I said, it depends on the product. It depends on the feature. Like the way the stuff's implemented underneath is very proprietary. And it's whatever the programmers were feeling like on that day when they designed it, you know, because there's always engineering trade-offs to doing it one way versus doing it the other way. But the problem is once, you know, once a vendor writes or designs their feature to work a certain way, like that's the way it works. They can't change it. And so if we're very rigid about what we allow in CSI, then we'll just rule out entire classes of implementations and say, no, that, you know, we're not going to support that, which I would actually be okay with, but you know, that does create problems from a standardization and, you know, community buy-in standpoint.
Yeah, I guess the main challenge I kind of see is from like a Kubernetes user standpoint. If there's like, you know, 50 different ways that the various drivers can support replication, then it makes that portability question really difficult because
Yes, I 100% agree. I think that as the CSI community, we should be trying to represent the interests of the end users and the interface that they're likely to want to consume. Because if we build a feature that some tiny fraction of vendors, or I'm sorry, if we build a feature that like is super flexible and so that every vendor can implement it, but the feature itself is unusable, then it won't get adopted and the effort will have been wasted. The flip side is, you know, we build a feature that only a tiny fraction of vendors can implement, and then you don't get very many implementations, then it doesn't get adopted for that reason. And so, you know, you really want to find that happy middle ground, but it's hard.
I guess I guess I'm just throwing out some ideas here, but like say for like the vendors where the group is immutable, essentially, if under the covers they support mutation by deleting and recreating, could that be a feasible solution?
Potentially. I mean, it again, it depends on like the semantics you expect to get out of that group and its snapshots of replication, right?
So what do you mean underneath they could change it? Then what
So
do
say like
reconciliation?
say at the Kubernetes level, we allow mutation of the volume group. And if, say, a storage vendor cannot actually support mutation of a volume group, but they could implement it by deleting the existing one and creating a new one.
I mean, whether that's okay or not depends entirely on the semantics you expect out of the group.
Right, so that will be for some. This will be really. I'm pretty sure there are many people will be asking for this modified group functionality, but if we add an existing one to the group.
No, I mean, I'm saying from the Kubernetes side, we support modification, but when a driver implements it, they implement it by deleting and creating a new one.
Oh, you say we support mutation, okay?
So the upshot would be that certain vendors, when you mutate their groups, you don't lose the history, and other vendors, when you mutate the groups, you do lose the history, and then that becomes the visible discrepancy from an end user's point of view.
But I guess, like, theoretically, an end user will not be going directly to the storage system to view the history.
Right. But what I mean is so it depends on what else you can do with those groups through the CSI layer. Like if everything you can do doesn't care about the history, then great, you've solved the problem. But like if let's say you wanted to implement some sort of a rollback functionality, and the fact that you had deleted the old group and created a new group meant that now you can't roll back past the time at which that happened. Like now you have a problem. But it's entirely dependent on like what it was you planned on doing with the group after you mutated it.
So I think I was thinking the challenge would be, let's say if the driver or the system does not support mutation, then they delete it, then that's the signature changes there. It's like the handle, all the handles changes.
Yeah, the handle can
Then
change. So
what do we
in
say?
that case, we would need to support mutation of the handle.
That's because that also involves all the volumes, right? The volumes we do not really allow those to be. So those become
I mean, for
totally new volumes.
volumes, we don't allow mutation of handles, but we
yeah,
could allow
this,
we could allow a mutation of the group handles.
But in this case, they cannot do this. That's what I'm saying. This will not work because when you delete it, meaning when you delete the group, meaning you delete the whole file system. Everything's gone. You can't keep it.
So I want to try to push in a different direction, perhaps that might help. So last month I had brought up the suggestion that maybe we need different types of groups for different types of functionalities. I think one of the reasons this discussion is so challenging is because we're imagining that a group can do all of the things, and because different features have different restrictions, like the union of all of those restrictions becomes super restrictive. If you had a special type of group for just taking like CG snapshots, for example, like it's way more, the union of all the restrictions of all the different storage companies that implement CG snapshots is probably a lot easier to deal with than the union of all the restrictions of all the types of groups. And we might be able to like develop a much simpler user interface for CG snapshots around a concept of a group that had from the CSI spec, like only one semantic, and then maybe we just require everyone to support that. And maybe it's possible because for that type of group, you need to be able to take CG snapshots, and it's relatively easy to implement whatever semantics you want when doing CG snapshots. Whereas like group replication puts a whole bunch of other restrictions on the underlying implementation and the types of changes you can make. And so like maybe then for replication groups, like you have a different set of rules at the Kubernetes layer to be more accommodating of the fact that replication groups just work differently underneath. So where I'm going is, if we decided to have different types of groups for different types of functions, it would alleviate some of this challenge of what restrictions do we want to put on how you mutate the group, and what types of changes are valid.
Yeah, so sure, that will be simpler in one aspect, but then this still, I think, does not solve this problem that Michelle was trying to address. Is like a lot of us, some storage systems can support adding an existing volume to the group where others cannot, right? So this is
right, but like so to take a concrete example,
completely.
To take a concrete example, like consistency group snapshots, like those, it's fairly easy to have an implementation of CG snapshots where like on a per snapshot basis, you can have a different set of volumes. And so like, if that's true, and again, I'm sort of guessing because that's how NetApp does it. I don't know how everyone else does it. Then we could say for CG snapshots, like the groups are maximally flexible.
I would ask you a question, like, so on NetApp side, I know you have implemented something in your Trident driver. What do you have? You have a consistent group snapshot CR?
No. I mean, Trident doesn't have any of this to my knowledge.
Does not? Oh.
And as a reminder, like I don't work at NetApp anymore, so this stuff could have changed that I don't know about. But like last time I checked, there was no CG snapshots in there.
But you were okay. I thought you were just saying that.
I'm saying that the NetApp storage underneath, it can take an arbitrary CG snapshot of an arbitrary set of volumes anytime you want, right? Like you can take a snapshot of volumes A, B, and C, and then later you can take one of B, D, and E, and then later you can take one of A, C, and F. Like you can just take snapshots of arbitrary sets of volumes and Like the group doesn't need to have a lifetime, right? You just tell it at the moment you take the snapshot which volumes need to be part of it, and it makes that happen. And it's so like so any type of grouping construct would work for that particular NetApp product for CG snapshots only. And so if you had a special CG snapshot group type, like we could say from the Kubernetes layer that you could do whatever you want to that group. You can mutate it, you can create it, you can delete it, you can have overlapping groups, you can have non-overlapping groups. Like we don't care what you do. You tell us what you want to do for your CG snapshot group, and we will make it happen. Assuming that like most other vendors don't have any restrictions, right? Like it becomes practical. But then when you come around and say, well, okay, this type of group is for replication.
So in this case, do you suggest have like 2 constructs or only 1 construct? So
I'm suggesting you have a different types of groups per feature. So you would have like a
no. Let's talk about snapshot.
Replication groups.
Let's forget about replication for a minute. I just want to understand what you're saying here. For this one you're proposing, are you talking about we only have this one group snapshot CR, or are you talking about we still have 2? We still have a group and a group snapshot. Do we still need 2 or just 1? Because I was trying to understand what you're saying.
You would need more than 2, right? Like you'd have a CR that represented groups for the purpose of taking snapshots, and that would represent like the list of volumes that you want to snapshot.
So what would be the input? The input will just be a list of volumes, but it's not. There will not be like a group itself.
But crucially, like it would support mutation, right? Because you could add things, you could delete things, and crucially, it could support overlapping groups.
Can I understand this? Before you move forward to that list, do you mean just every time people just change this list instead of is there a placeholder for this list of volumes? I guess that's what I was trying to ask. Is there a group for this list of volumes or not?
I mean, it will be that's a UI concern for how we represent.
No, I'm just saying like Kubernetes.
I mean, it's API concern, how we want to represent.
But this is one thing we need to discuss here, right? This is very important, right? There are suggestions.
But I'm trying to split that apart from other types of groups. Instead of saying there's just one type of group that must do all of the things, I'm saying we could have a special type of group or a special type of API to manage groups for the purpose of taking snapshots, and a completely different API to manage groups for the purpose of doing replication. And if we come up with a 3rd and a 4th and a 5th thing, like we can have new group concepts for each one of those, and each one can be tailored to the needs of that particular feature. And if there's any restrictions we need to place on the mutability of the group, we could do that with knowledge of exactly what we're talking about, instead of this wide open, like we don't know what type of groups are actually going to exist underneath this thing.
Yeah, this is definitely one approach. I guess it's just also need to think if we do this way, we will be ending up with how many type of different groups. There's one for replication,
that's the downside.
One for the placement, one for that's the I guess that's the same we are trying to figure out as well.
I do think
you know where I stand.
Yeah, it does seem to me, just from listening to the conversation, that it might be the most kind of user-friendly, given that we are trying to optimize. We're trying to optimize for supporting the maximum number of vendors and make the user experience as predictable and clean as possible. And so trying to do that with a single implementation for all functions seems like infeasible. And so if you can narrow the implementations a little bit by having separate CRs and separate CSI functions for each type of volume group, it seems like it's not so bad, right? So you have placement groups, you have replication groups, you have snapshot groups. What other types of groups do we imagine we're going to add?
So right now it's just this 3. I don't know what others in the future, but right now this is 3. But in the CAP itself, right now we are only talking about snapshot. We actually didn't really talk about replication. We're just saying we leave room for future expansion. So yeah, I guess we just when you decide right now, but the CAP is really only focusing on snapshot, because otherwise it's already so long. It's going to be
Or
I mean,
too
I think if
much.
we, as long as we phrase the names of the objects in this, in the KEP for snapshot groups to such that it's clear that the groups are for snapshots, and that if we wanted to change something or add another type of group in the future, it wouldn't clash with what we already have. Then yeah, we could just
And if
proceed
we,
with just snapshot groups and then figure out what we want to do with the rest later.
Michelle, any thoughts? I don't know.
I mean, I guess we should still send out the email so that we can, you know, ask all the various driver owners to see if they can support, you know, mutable snapshot groups. I think that would help and determine if we can simplify this API.
Like another question we might want to ask is, can you support overlapping groups?
What do you mean overlapping groups again?
Two different
Well-
groups with the share a member.
Oh yeah, okay. I think
So the
we
same volumes in
we
two
have-
different groups, like
in the
that,
current
that may or may
design.
not be supported.
In the current design, it is possible. We do have that one there. So
Right, but like some vendors might not be able to do it depending on what their magic is under the covers.
if it cannot, what does that mean? So they
I mean,
can only be
think about
in.
like placement groups are a good example of like where you would not want them to be overlapping, right? If the same volume's in two different placement groups, you have
Oh yeah, that yeah.
you have a problem. So like you
Mhm.
probably would want to say no. Similarly for replication, like the same volume being part of two replication groups creates weird issues. So you might want to say no overlapping. But for snapshot groups, like who cares, right? It's perfectly valid.
Right. But I think for some storage systems, basically like one group can do both snapshotting and replication. So I guess that's the counter argument for
I
having.
wonder how many storage systems are in that boat, because I'm
I
sure
know
that there's
that
at least one.
Tom was here. Tom Watson from Dell was here last time. Basically, they have that. I think Pure has that too. I don't remember others. Okay, so so we could definitely send some email out. Okay, so one question is mutable snapshot groups. I think the overlapping one, it's a little hard to explain to people.
Well, if we don't want to support overlapping, then we have to have a scheme for preventing users from adding the same member to two different groups. Otherwise, you'll hit errors,
We
right?
could, yeah, but those are, yeah. Well, right now we have not really get to that point. So we could, I mean, if we ask them, I guess I just found that this question will be a little hard to write, but
If you want to start like a Google Doc, we
okay, we can
collaborate on it and
comment on that. Okay, sure.
help structure the question. Feel free to share that with
Sure.
Michelle, Ben, and I.
Okay.
A really good way to think about overlapping groups that people actually do is like hierarchical groups, right? If you want to have a bunch of small groups and then a group that comprises multiple groups and then a group that comprises groups of groups, like that forms a logical hierarchy of all your volumes. Like those groups are inevitably going to overlap. And people actually think that way.
Do we want to prevent that at the Kubernetes level, or do we just want the driver to handle that? I guess that's also a question. Or do we just say, user could always try that, but then driver decides whether that would work or not. But I can, yeah, definitely I can.
I think this is the
question.
sort of thing where the unpredictability of it could impact implementation. right? So I think the example that Ben had of if you have snapshot groups or let's say replication groups that lose history. That was a good example. I think if you some implementations will lose history, and at some point, the user expects they want to be able to roll back to a certain point, but if they mutated, some of those groups aren't going to be able to be rolled back. We want to prevent that type of unpredictability from the user experience, ideally. And so I think if we can find the sweet spot between what vendors mostly support and what our ideal user experience is, then let's go down that path.
Sure. Right, the only thing is I think for snapshot group, that should not be a problem, but the replication group, we are not really, our CAP are not really covering the replication part yet. So, but okay, it's fine. Just like,
Well, but we can still
ahead of
poll
them.
users and ask them, but poll vendors and ask them how many of them a replication group and a snapshot group are the same thing, because that's useful information. If a
Yeah,
huge number of them turn out
mhm.
to be the exact same thing, then maybe NetApp is just an oddball, and and it becomes NetApp's problem to conform.
Oh, you're saying for NetApp, they're two different.
NetApp, they're definitely not. I know that.
Okay. Okay.
But I don't know the rest of the industry.
Mhm.
I don't know how common it is for there to just be one group type that does all of the things.
It's partly split. I don't think NetApp is the only one. Because for some storage system, they don't really have like a real physical group construct on the storage system. It's really just like a group of volumes, right? When you take a snapshot, then at that time you need to put them together. But before that, you don't really have that. So those are like logical grouping that I did mention that in the CAP.
But you do have other weird restrictions where, like, if again, using NetApp as an example, the Trident driver can support multiple physical storage systems behind it. And if some of your volumes are on one storage system and some of your volumes are on a
What is the
totally different
difference?
storage system.
Are they all NetApp storage system? What do you mean that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm saying,
Oh, can you go
hypothetical case,
across? Okay,
you
but
have-
that's the internal
you have
thing,
Trident
right?
with multiple NetApp systems, and if you have a group containing some volumes on one system and some volumes on a totally different system, you try to take a consistent snapshot group across
That's
those
like
volumes, it won't
the
work.
same as the
'Cause-
storage, like storage pool things, kind of internal architecture thing, right? So
But
internal.
the key is like Trident tries to hide this from Kubernetes users and makes it look like it's all one giant pool, and like that lie would get exposed.
Well, that's why we are not really talking about consistency at all. Then, so we did clarify that one in document CAP and somewhere maybe in the spec as well, in the CSI spec as well. We basically say that whether we are not responsible for whether we're not defining whether it's consistency or not in Kubernetes or CSI. This is up to the storage systems. They claim they're consistent and they are consistent. That's their thing. We cannot guarantee that. So we cannot.
Right. But I'm saying if your intent is to obtain a consistent group snapshot,
no,
like
it's not.
NetApp could do that.
No,
if all the volumes are on the same physical storage
all up to
system.
the vendor. Vendor can tell user, hey, if you want to make this consistent, you do this way. That's up to vendor. But in CSI and the Kubernetes, since we cannot guarantee that, so we do not even.
I think that's the sort of user experience inconsistency that worries me.
Right? Yeah. I mean, why take a group snapshot at all if it might not be consistent? Just take a bunch of individual snapshots and call it a day.
Well, that's for the management of your volumes, right? So,
but the Kubernetes API has to provide some value, and if the value is just, hey, we're going to take a bunch of snapshots and they might be consistent.
Some storage
I guess
systems
Ben, one question I have. So for your case, like, because it's two different storage systems, are they two different storage classes?
No, not necessarily. like Trident tries very hard to hide the fact that you might have lots and lots of things behind it, and it just makes it look like one big homogeneous pool of stuff.
But how do they
so like,
choose which one to use? When you create
Based on-
provisional volume, where does it go?
wherever there's free space.
It's only
Like,
space.
one
Are
of
there
them-
other things that it needs to choose?
No, I
I mean,
mean,
I guess
there's other, but I mean, if your storage class doesn't have anything in it, then it's going to come down to where there's space. It'll just pick one. If you do have restrictions in your storage class, it will filter down to, you know, the one that you asked for.
Okay,
But
so it's still
entirely,
determined by, so storage class can play a role there basically.
it can, but there's plenty of examples where one storage class can cover everything. And it's just based on wherever there's free
Sure.
space.
So in our case as well, right? So there is like when you create a group, there is a class there, right? So you could basically, I think we could do it similarly.
But I think going back to that consistency question, like if we basically tell the user, yeah, you can take a snapshot, but good luck. You might get consistent, you might not get consistent. Depends on the storage system. Good luck. I don't think that is a good user experience, right? So ideally, we want to offer some level of predictability to the end user to say, like, at least, you know, opt in and say, I want a consistent group snapshot. And if a storage system is incapable of that, then, you know, we block that and say, hey, storage system cannot support that, return an error to the user, so that someone can build functionality on top of this to say, like, hey, I will offer you, you know, in a portable manner, consistent group snapshots. Otherwise, it's kind of it's going to be very
So
difficult.
sad, actually. So when I was working on this one, this was a long time ago, right? This other project. I remember what actually someone from NetApp side coming and
Saad, we
telling me
lost
that.
you, or we lost me.
What? Can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you, but Saad just trailed off.
Oh no, I'm done with my thought. Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I would just say, so let me just say, answer Sad's question. Sad, I remember that when I was working on this one, on this other project, right? So at the open source project, initially we did specify, we call it consistency groups. Someone from NetApp actually come in and tell me, hey, remove consistency from this name, call it generic group, because they want to be able to have a replication group that does not guarantee the right order consistency. We made this big change of coming from deprecating consistency group and going for generic group.
But that was for replication.
That is for
right?
replication.
So
correct.
if we scope this down to just snapshots, would there be the same concern?
I think there are still be users who want to be able to say, I have this volume, I have this group of volumes I want to management together. Even if storage system cannot guarantee the consistency, I still want to be able to do this just with one content, basically. Right. So
So I think in my head, what I'm seeing is like, yeah, you know, applying something like consistency across all types of volume groups becomes very strange, which kind of makes sense, the NetApp pushback that you got. But to Michelle's point, if we scope this down just to snapshot and say that we have a knob, we have an explicit maybe field or something that says, I want a snapshot group, and I also want it to be consistent, then the storage vendor can decide whether they support that or not. And so if you provision a snapshot group with consistency and storage system doesn't allow it, doesn't support it, then they fail. And then now you have a predictable way to be able to say, okay, the snapshot group I am getting is supports consistency or not. And maybe you don't care about that, right?
So
you would need to
suggest,
return that error at snapshot time, not group creation time, because the group is mutable.
Do you suggest this to add this as a first class field in the class, what is that, group class or something? Or
Yeah, somewhere we should have it as
we
a
actually have that. I have that earlier.
Okay.
I removed that because was it someone young is not, it might be young or someone who having some concerns with that. So I actually removed that. It was there before. I actually have consistency in in the API before, but I removed that to address some concerns
Yeah,
from.
so I think the concern was valid when we had multiple different types of groups trying to all live inside one implementation. So when we had snapshot, replication, placement, everything in one group, it made like, it wouldn't work. But I think if we scope this down to just snapshot, then I think we can safely reintroduce a field that says, I want to opt into consistency.
And I want to emphasize, like, that's why somebody would use this feature, is because they were interested in getting consistent snapshots across volumes. Anyone can write a loop that takes multiple snapshots of multiple volumes using the existing API. So the value that this API brings is the ability to actually get a consistent snapshot across 2 or more volumes.
I think it was actually strictly for snapshot. I think in the initial initial doc, it might be Yang or someone. I need to check, because we didn't really have anything for replication in the existing CAP. So that consistency is strictly for snapshot, actually.
Yeah, it sounds like your CAP basically is effectively scoped to snapshot in everything
Yeah.
but name.
Mhm.
And so it would
But
probably
there could have been discussions around it where people got the idea that this is going to be the group concept for everything going forward.
That was my intention. That was my intention.
And that could have flavored some of the feedback if people understood that intention. So if we
No, I think
clarify
this
that
one
that's
is-
not our intention, maybe it would help.
I can check with Yang. I saw this from him, but I think that is strictly for the snapshot, I thought. But let me see if that comments was from him.
so do we have a set of conclusions that we agree on here? Or still open questions?
I guess we should send out a survey to the CSI list, so that we can kind of get feedback on sort of the capabilities of the various storage systems.
Yeah, we could create like a Google form or something and send that out. Sounds good.
Or ask people to add bullets or rows to a table in a Google Doc or something, because then you can get more nuance
Sure.
than just a form.
And then in terms of direction, do we agree on, for example, I think there is a couple of big questions. So one was on scoping down, instead of having a generic volume group, have a function specific volume group. Is that an open question, or are we agreed on that?
I thought, Michelle, you still have concerns on this one, right? I'm open to go that way if that can help us move forward.
I mean, the big downside is going to be that over time, if we have all 3 group types, you have that many more APIs for creating and deleting and modifying groups. But I feel like that's a price we have to pay to get a good user experience and compatibility with vendors at the same time.
Yeah, I think having like 3 APIs to represent each thing it's going to be, I don't know, more than 10 or more API objects that we're going to introduce. So like, if there's a way we can simplify things and like just only have 1 API or 2 APIs per function, then I think that would be nice. Like I guess my ideal thing for like is just having 1 API and all you do is just specify a label selector on what volumes you want to take a snapshot on.
right? So in this case, the generic volume group will be better. At least just two volume group. Oh, actually not choose. We have a volume group content and the class. So yeah, and then there's a snapshot size. There are 6 new APIs already, just for the snapshot.
Why there's 6? I thought there's only 3.
Oh, there was also when there was a content, right? There was a volume group and volume group content. This is from the Kubernetes side. There is also the just same as the PVPVC, right? Volume group and volume group content. We had that discussion as well before.
Yeah, I think if we can find a way to reduce the number of APIs and still end up with a predictable user experience, I have no concern with it. I think my only concern would be, can we maximize the utility of this by maximizing the number of vendors that can implement this and make the user experience actually usable? And so if we end up with something that works for all vendors, is a single API, but is effectively so unpredictable that you kind of lose the utility and value in it, then I think that's not good.
Yeah, I think the last one is non-negotiable. It has to, the user experience has to be predictable. Everything else is negotiable.
I think, okay, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to remember the proposal. But I think if we can get rid of, the group APIs, I think that would be great. Because my envisioning was like, in the snapshot group API, all you have is sort of like a label selector, and that defines your group. So you don't need a first class separate group object.
That is fine if we only support snapshotting. Yes. For replication, you do need to have a group to hold the volumes.
Yeah, but that could be like part of the replication group API. It doesn't have to be a separate group object.
Sorry, I'm not.
Like you can define the group as part of the replication group API. You don't need like a group API and a replication group API.
Right, you just need one. You need one replication group, basically. That has to be a group.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so that case will be like one. Yeah, so for snapshot, we just have this one set of API only for snapshotting without a group. And then for replication, we'll just have a replication group. That's for the future. That means we are separating them, basically. We don't have a generic group.
Yeah, so I think another way of saying it is that we don't need to mirror. So if we separate by function, let's say snapshot and replication and so on, all of those APIs don't need to mirror each other. Some of those APIs could be smaller than others. So for example, snapshot, it sounds like we could eliminate the concept of a group from volume group or from snapshot group, and really it becomes just a selector at snapshot time. Whereas for replication group, there is a concept of a group that is standalone, and I think that seems reasonable to me and is a way to reduce the API surface while still allowing for kind of the restrictions per function.
This would work. This is, I think, currently how .emc implemented is they actually have a, for the snapshotting, they just have a group snapshot, just like one thing, and then a replication group is separate. I asked Red Hat folks, they say this would work as well.
So it sounds like we might have an agreement between the four of us. It sounds like what we're saying is multiple APIs per function, but not identical. So reduced API surface, is that right?
I mean, we have to see exactly what it looks like, but that does sound
Yeah,
good.
Anyone disagree? Okay, let's write that down as a conclusion for now. If we come back and disagree, I think that's completely fine and valid. But this might be a good place to start pushing forward. Okay, we are at time. I'm going to go ahead and end this meeting so that folks can start the next one. Thanks everyone for the great discussion.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for driving, Saad. Bye-bye.